The World Cup final of 2022 saw a losing hat-trick from Kylian Mbappe and the Argentina maestro Messi finally winning the trophy. It has been coined the greatest game of football ever. But what if I told you there was another game played 50 years earlier that was even better? This is the story of the greatest game in the 1970 World Cup in Mexico, an Italy versus West Germany semi-final thriller that saw 7 goals. Welcome to the Luke Alfred Show. I have 30 years of experience on the front lines of sports journalism, covering some of the biggest games in cricket, rugby, the FIFA World Cup, and even the Olympic Games. Come and join me as we learn about some of the greatest sports stories you've never heard. I'm Luke Alfred, and welcome to the show. There were concerns going into the 1970 World Cup that the tournament might be frazzled by the Mexican sun. Early kickoffs were at noon, when it was particularly hot, to accommodate evening viewing times in Europe. Some of the early matches seemed to bear out the doom-laden predictions. In front of mainly 107,000 rowdy locals, Mexico drew 0-0 with the USSR in the tournament's opening game. In the group featuring Italy, Sweden, Uruguay and Israel, there were 16 teams in 4 groups of 4 at the Mexico World Cup in 1970. 6 matches produced 6 meager goals. There were some astonishingly gifted teams at the Mexico World Cup. Think of Brazil, West Germany and World Cup holders England, but they clearly needed time to find their feet. When they did find their feet, now that would be interesting. It would be best foot forward. The whole tournament would be on a firmer footing, and everyone could head into the future feet first. Running counter to early tournament fears that the heat would blight attacking play was the introduction of red and yellow cards for referees for the very first time. Generally lax refereeing in the previous World Cup in England meant fractious matches and flippant fouling. There was generalized unhappiness from teams who wanted to score goals. A black and white photograph from the legendarily ill-tempered England versus Argentina match in 1966 shows England's George Cohen swapping his jersey with an Argentine player. Cohen's manager, Sir Alf Ramsey, is trying to stop him. Quote, "No, George, you can't swap jerseys with an animal," Ramsey is alleged to have told his player. There is another interpretation. Looking carefully at the photo suggests that Cohen might have reached the same conclusion independently of his gaffer's prompting. It isn't a jersey swap, rather it's the reversal of a swap, the grumpy jersey give-back. I gave it to you, sure, in the hope of getting your jersey in return, but I changed my mind. Can I have mine back? Oh, you want yours back? Well, give me mine back first. So disillusioned was Pelé with the treatment defenders meted out to him in the 1966 World Cup that he retired. After a 2-year international sabbatical, Pelé was persuaded back, but it set a worrying precedent. You didn't want a player folk came to see not being where they expected him to be. The authorities took note. Red and yellow cards might not put an end to roguery, but they would offer gifted players protection. They might also act as a deterrent. As it happened, no one was sent off in the 1970 World Cup, so perhaps the introduction of cards achieved their desired effects. And maybe they helped to provide the tournament with some of its early momentum. The 6 goals in Italy's group appeared to be the exception that proved the rule as the World Cup progressed. Elsewhere in the tournament, Brazil beat Romania 3-2. West Germany beat Bulgaria 5-2. Mexico beat El Salvador 4-0. And the Soviet Union beat Belgium 4-1. Noon kickoffs or not, the tournament was hotting up. It transpired that Mexico 1970 never cooled down. Football temperatures just kept on rising. The 4 quarterfinals, for example, served up 17 piping hot goals, slightly over 4 goals per game. Between them, the 2 semi-finals netted, a good word, don't you think, 11 goals, with 7 in one of them. It's a match to which we'll come shortly, but whichever way you look at it, 11 goals in 2 semi-finals represents value for money. Memory is both personal and collective, both idiosyncratic and broad, and so we remember many of the same things about the 1970 World Cup in Mexico, but many different things too. We remember Brazil's butter yellow shirts and Puma boots, their pastel blue shorts. We remember Italy's dark blue shirts and white shorts. We remember England's white and light blue. We remember Gordon Banks's incredible save from Pelé's downward header in the England versus Brazil group stage match. There was even a themed Mexico World Cup song. It's all you might expect. Here's a cheeky snippet just so you can get into the Mexican mood.
México 70 va a recibir de todo el mundo al campeón de los deportes. Fútbol México 70, Fútbol México 70, Fútbol México 70, Fútbol México 70.
We remember the Adidas-designed ball with the 20 hexagonal white panels and the 12 pentagonal black panels. It was known, if these things are important to you, as the Telstar, and was so designed to aid viewing if you were watching the football on a black and white television. The 6-sided white panels were meant to contrast nicely with the 5-sided black ones, making it easier to spot the ball. But what you remember most about the 1970 World Cup is its emptiness. Space was huge in 1970, a really big thing. Everyone was into it, everyone needed it and couldn't get enough of it. You might not see a defender for days on end. It was as though defenders were operating in a different universe, to a different timetable. Looking back at the highlights on YouTube, you realize that everyone has so much space. Even the Telstar has the requisite space in which to do its thing. The Brazilians were so into space that prior to the tournament, they followed a NASA-designed training program. Their exploration of space on the pitch was pretty nifty too. Far from living up to early expectations that the Mexican heat would take the sting out of the football, Brazilian goals fell like rain. 8 in the group stages, 4 in the quarters, 3 in the semi, 4 in the final against Italy. All in all, they scored 19 goals in their 6 World Cup matches, which wasn't too shabby at all. Brazil was the best side with the best players. They wore the best kit. They played the most attractive football. They did so in the heat. They were so good that even goals they didn't score stuck in the memory. In their 3-1 victory over Uruguay in the semi-final, Pelé received a diagonal pass from his left, but instead of intercepting the pass shortly before the arrival of the charging keeper, he dummied it, sprinting around the keeper to collect the ball. This, however, proved too much for him. The angle was too acute, and Pelé failed to score. It was the best goal Brazil never scored, and everybody loved it. While Brazil might have been the best at many things in Mexico in 1970, they probably didn't play in the best game. That honor fell to Italy and West Germany, who played a cracker of a semi-final at the Azteca Stadium in Mexico City. The West Germans weren't very West German in Mexico, at least not in attitude. They conceded goals but scored more of them, a principle their fans mostly loved. They beat Morocco 2-1, Peru 3-1, and Bulgaria in the final game to take them to the quarters, where they controversially beat England 3-2 in extra time. Italy's path to the semi-finals was different, as if in a leisurely siesta they opened their campaign with consecutive 0-0 draws. The first was against Uruguay, a pretty decent side, it must be said, so was in no way shameful. But their second goalless draw was against Israel, not a mighty side. Italy seemed to walk themselves out of sleep, not too energetically, mind you, with a 1-0 win over Sweden in their final group game before thumping the hosts 4-1 in the quarters to approach the semi with a gathering head of steam. Forgive me while I interrupt a sports story to tell you about the Luke Alfred Show Patreon. As you may know, being a writer is not the most lucrative career choice. Please consider making a small donation to keep the show going at patreon.com/The Luke Alfred Show. But for now, let's get back to the story. Given West Germany's reputation for freewheeling brilliance and Italy's reputation for pretty much the opposite, it came as a surprise in the semi-final that Italy scored first. Roberto Bonensegna worked a 1-2 on the edge of the West Germany area and fired a left-footed shot which deflected off the inside of Sepp Maier's upright into the far corner of the West German goal. Try as they might, West Germany couldn't equalize. Franz Beckenbauer surged into the Italian penalty area from deep and was brought down. He claimed a penalty which wasn't given. Wolfgang Overath hit the crossbar. Italian defender Roberto Rossato cleared off the line. Enrico Albertosi pulled off some miraculous saves in the Italian goal, but also led a charmed life. On one occasion, he hoofed a clearance kick into the back of a retreating West German forward. The ball bobbled agonizingly towards the line, but didn't cross it. His goal mouth seemed bewitched. With the semi-final a minute from being over, and Italy still holding on to their 1-0 lead, the German Jürgen Grabowski crossed left-footed from the Italian right. It was one of those crosses that falls uncannily into contested territory, like a frog jumping right into the middle of the pond. The Italian goalkeeper, Albertosi, seemed unsure of whether to claim the ball, but probably should have, because he was closest to it. But West German defender Karl-Heinz Schnellinger was closer. He pounced from close, stubbing it across the line as the semi-final moved into extra time. The goal has entered German sporting folklore. Schnellinger was a defender, so didn't score many goals, but he was also a defender who played his domestic football for AC Milan, where, of course, he didn't score very many goals. The fact that he had scored for West Germany against Italy inspired commentator Ernst Huberty to say, almost in perplexity, quote, "Schnellinger, of all people." Huberty, who was of mixed German and Luxembourgish ancestry, was a feature of West German sporting life in the 1970s. He had his own show on national TV. There is a tendency of people closely associated with high-profile sport to be a bit sniffy and proprietorial about it. It was as if Schnellinger hadn't read the script. He had dared score. The anecdote becomes tastier. Schnellinger never scored for West Germany again, but he did score the crucial goal that no one else scored, the goal that took their World Cup semi-final at the Azteca Stadium into extra time. The semi-final was a match of regulation time and extra time, neither bearing much resemblance to the other. If the teams, particularly West Germany, struggled to score in the first half, both teams struggled to defend in extra time. First to score with the teams locked at 1-1 was West Germany. Indecision in failing to clear a corner cost the Italians dear. They couldn't control a bouncing ball, and suddenly Gerd Müller had snuck in and towed the ball across the line, with Albertosi and his defenders looking at each other as if to say, I thought you were dealing with it. The ball bounced quite a bit in the rarefied altitude and heat of Mexico, more so than perhaps players thought it would. The Italian defenders, and of course Albertosi, the goalkeeper, seemed particularly tempted by its whims and caprices. They got themselves into many a muddle. Looking back, it's surprising that West Germany took so long to equalize in regulation time. So many comic capers were there in front of the Italian goals. Ball watching aside, Italy equalized shortly afterwards. With one casually sublime step, Gianni Rivera lobbed a free kick into the West German box. Sigi Helt seemed to misjudge the pace at which the ball was hit, despite his backpedal, and when he discovered he wasn't going to be able to head it away, he sort of shot out an ineffectual arm. Italy might have had a plausible shout for a handball, but it didn't matter because Tarcisio Bergnic the defender was able to take advantage of what, in effect, amounted to a pass from the West German substitute and rifle home the equalizer from close, 2-2. There was something tired about Italy's second goal, and something tired about West Germany's defending, which was sloppy and out of character. It was an incredibly tired passage of play, possibly rendered more tired by the fact that everyone realized they weren't out of their misery just yet. The heat tires you. A World Cup semi-final that is tied at 2-2 makes you tired. But what tires you even more than these two things is the expectation of exertions to come. That's truly exhausting. It's enough to get you to ask about being substituted, although Beckenbauer was obliged to stay on despite a dislocated shoulder because West Germany had already used up her two substitutes. The next score was Italy's. Breaking up a West Germany attack on their left, Rivera swept the ball out of defence to his left winger, Angelo Domenghini. The winger crossed to Gigi Riva, a comparative rarity amongst footballers of the time because he was left-footed. Riva controlled the cross with an angled instep and, with his toes, flicked the ball further to his left. The flick was beautifully counterintuitive because it took the ball away from goal. It also took the West Germany defender totally out of the equation because he, in his tiredness, was expecting a more direct approach from Riva. With the defender out of the picture, Riva lined up his left-footed shot. His angle was spot on. He fired a diagonal shot powerfully across Sepp Maier in the West German goal as the ball hit the back of the net just inside the German left-hand upright. It was 3-2 to Italy. We can hear the commentary snippet about the passage which led to Italy's third goal right here.
But he's lost the ball here. Chance of a counter-attack for Italy. This is Rivera again. He's got Dominici outside him. Riva here now in the middle. What a chance for Italy! And it's there! A smash and grab goal from one end to the other. The pendulum of this semi-final swings in Italy's favour once again.
A child of the north, Riva was sold to Cagliari in Sardinia at a young age. Other players might have sulked, seeing it as a demotion to the provinces, but Riva embraced the club and his new fans. He helped Cagliari gain promotion to Serie A in 1964 as the second-place side to Varese and, in the 1969-70 season, inspired them to their first-ever Serie A title. His stay at Cagliari had all the hallmarks of a love affair. The love deepened when other suitors came to Sardinia. They made promises. They flaunted confections and baubles. Riva and the club would not budge. They were betrothed. There is a memory game played in Italy by football madmen. It consists of naming, say, famous Italian teams, like the team in the match under consideration here. When the great Italian teams have been mentioned, player for player, the lens is narrowed. Then the men might be required, say, to name player for player the tragic Torino team, who all died in the infamous air disaster of May 1949 on the way home from Lisbon, where they just played in a friendly against Benfica. Other, less well-known teams might be rattled off verbatim too. A Parma team, a Sampdoria team, a Lazio or Napoli team. Cagliari fans, needless to say, know the Scudetto-winning team of Riva's off by heart. Helt, meanwhile, was proving to be an inspired substitution for West Germany. He had fresh legs. He ran at the tired Italian defenders. West Germany forced a corner. From another, again the impression is one of fatigue, Müller exploited indecision in Italian defensive ranks to pounce on a header across the Italian goalmouth from close. It was 3-3 with only 10 minutes of extra time left. When was this match going to end? A truism, yes, a cliché, undoubtedly, but good teams find ways to win. Bonensegna, who scored Italy's first goal, managed to weasel his way past West Germany defender Willi Schulz. With a yard or two on Schultz, Bonensegner headed for the West German goals, but the angle was narrow. He crossed intelligently to the back of the box, to the very place the retreating defenders and defensive midfielders didn't think the ball would go. Riviera was coming up in support and found the ball at his feet. He stroked it into the back of the net from range. Extra time had resulted in 5 goals. Italy was through to the final. Italy might have been through to the final, but in a way they'd played their final. They'd taken the lead, drawn to level matters at 2-2, and taken the lead again through the Riva goal before Müller scored his second. Just when you thought it was going to penalties, so Riviera popped up in the box. Maya dived one way, but the regal Italian substitute was canny. He fired his shot the other way. Coming on for Sandro Mazzola in the 46th minute of the semi-final, Riviera, the son of a railway worker, played a part in Italy's second and third goal, scoring their decisive fourth. Going into the final, he might just have expected to play, but Ferruccio Valcareggi, the Italian manager, was having none of it. Valcareggi had started with Mazzola in the semi-final and would start with Mazzola in the final. Riviera would have to wait his turn. That matters between him, a Milan player, and Mazzola, an Inter player, was strained didn't help things in the slightest. Mazzola had his supporters. He also had a superb Italian football pedigree. Sandro's father was Valentino Mazzola, who was one of the premier players of the immediate post-Second World War period. Valentino lost his life in the Torino air disaster we heard about earlier, when the plane bringing them back from a friendly in Portugal ploughed into the foot of a basilica in heavy fog. By picking Sandro for the final, was coach Valcareggi pandering to sentiment? It is difficult to say for sure, but it is strange that Riviera only made an appearance in the final in the 84th minute, coming on for Bonensegner after he played such an important part in the semi-final. Mazzola, as it happens, played in every minute of the final. In the end, it didn't matter. Brazil, a team who had been hacked out of the 1966 World Cup in England, returned in the Mexican heat to capture the World Cup title they held in 1962. They did so emphatically, winning the final against Italy 4-1, thanks to Pelé's pop-up header and goals late in the match for Gerson, Jairzinho, and an absolute stonker from Carlos Alberto. Italy had played their final, Brazil had won hers, and the competition ended with no one having any concerns about noon starts, because it was the competition itself that really started to hot up. If you enjoyed this episode of The Luke Alfred Show, please give me a 5-star rating. As an independent creator, this podcast is made possible through your support.